When thinking about a child's personality, parents will often say things like, she acts just like her mother, or he gets that from his dad. It is indeed the case that children come by their personalities honestly. From an early age, they closely observe their parents. They internalize how their parents interact with them, and they notice the dynamics within relationships, particularly between their parents. Children also pay attention to what brings their parents joy, what causes distress, and what behaviors of theirs elicit certain responses. Over time, these observations, combined with a child's innate temperament, helps shape their developing personality. Some refer to this process as absorbing ways of being, that is, the patterns and behaviors that are consistently modeled in their environment. Children unconsciously integrate aspects of these observed behaviors into their sense of self. So ultimately, personality becomes a combination of a child's inherent disposition and the learned strategies they perceive as effective or necessary for navigating the world. In seeking to understand personality traits or behavioral challenges, it is tempting to lean heavily on genetic explanations. For example, it might be said, this child behaves this way because one parent has ADHD or depression. It's genetic. While genetic predispositions can contribute to temperament and behavior, relying too much on this perspective risks oversimplifying the complexity of personality development. It may also inadvertently overlook the significant role of environmental influences, particularly the impact of parental behaviors. When behaviors are viewed solely through a genetic lens, such as attributing actions entirely to neurodivergence or labeling them as inherited traits, this can limit how parents or providers engage with children, and it may also lead children to internalize these labels in ways that restrict their sense of agency and growth. To illustrate this dynamic, let's consider a boy growing up with a father who has ADHD. The father's ADHD might manifest in abrupt shifts from one task to another, irritability under stress, or a tendency to become short tempered with his family when he's overwhelmed. The boy observes and internalizes these behaviors, even if the root cause is not fully understood. The child doesn't consciously think, my dad acts this way because he has ADHD. Instead, these behaviors are perceived as fundamental aspects of his dad's personality and standards for operating in the world. Over time, the child may come to believe that life must be approached at a rapid pace to accomplish anything meaningful, that you cannot concentrate on more than one thing at a time, and that relationships often lead to distress and should be avoided, to include the ones with your family. This implicit learning might also lead the child to suppress his own emotions or problems, assuming that sharing them would overwhelm others. As these emotions build up, they may eventually erupt in outbursts, mirroring the challenges observed in his dad. This dynamic often results in comments such as, he gets that from his father, without recognizing the deeper learned patterns underlying the behavior. Now, consider a child with a parent who has borderline personality disorder. Such a parent might frequently exhibit emotional volatility, perceive minor slights as major rejections, or react with intense anger when feeling abandoned. In response to this parent, the child may become hypervigilant to potential mistakes or signs of rejection, adopting strategies to reduce the perceived threat from the parent. This might manifest as a child taking on a caregiving role, striving to please the parent and, by extension, protect themselves from the parent's emotional outbursts. Initially, these strategies serve as practical defenses against fear and anxiety caused by the parent's behavior. For instance, the child might develop an intense fear of abandonment, heightened sensitivity to perceived slights, or reactive anger as a way to avoid shame or preempt emotional conflicts between themselves and their parent. Over time, however, these defenses often generalize to other areas of life, such as school, friendships, or future relationships. What began as a situational coping mechanism gradually becomes an ingrained pattern. Repeated and reinforced, these defenses can evolve into traits that shape how the child interacts with the world. This illustrates how behaviors that initially serve to protect the child in a specific environment can later become embedded in their personality. All of this raises an important question. How can parents and providers develop a more nuanced understanding of a child's personality and behavior, one that considers both nature and nurture? Psychologists and healthcare professionals typically avoid diagnosing children under 18 with personality disorders as their personalities are still forming. Instead, we might say a child is at risk for developing certain traits such as borderline or narcissistic tendencies. However, it's essential to recognize these traits as defense mechanisms, adaptive strategies that children develop based on their observations of and interactions with their environment. The key takeaway is this: children do not inherit personality disorders, nor is it conclusive to state that a child inherits ADHD or autism. What we perceive as personality traits, and sometimes even early signs of ADHD or autism, often originate as unconscious defense mechanisms that children develop to navigate and protect themselves within their early relationships. If left at the level of the unconscious, these defense mechanisms become part of how they navigate the world. Therefore, the behaviors and emotional regulation modeled by caregivers significantly influence the patterns that children internalize and repeat. Here are some actionable steps for parents to consider. Reflect on your own behaviors. Pay close attention to how you respond to stress, conflict, and other challenges. Recognize the behaviors your child might be internalizing. Care for your own well being. Address your own emotional and psychological struggles, whether it's ADHD, depression, or other challenges, through therapy, support groups, or self care strategies. If you are receiving treatment for or have been diagnosed with a mental health condition, it is essential to have your child in therapy as well to help ensure that their habits and coping strategies remain flexible and do not solidify into entrenched patterns of behavior or personality. Communicate openly. Talk to your child about your struggles in an age appropriate way. This helps them understand that your behaviors are not their fault and that they don't need to replicate those patterns to succeed in the world. For example, a parent struggling with ADHD might say, "Sometimes I get distracted or frustrated because my brain works differently. It's not your fault, and I'm working on it." Transparency helps children make sense of their environment without blaming themselves or internalizing unhealthy patterns. Ultimately, supporting a child's personality development means guiding them toward healthy ways of being in the world, patterns that allow for meaningful relationships, effective coping, and authentic self expression. By taking responsibility for personal patterns, parents and providers can empower children to develop theirs with greater intention and resilience. Thanks for tuning in to this course, and I'll see you again soon.